details seem to apply to Mum. However, when I read this piece with her, I promised her I would add, she also delivereth meals on wheels in the middle of the winter, and prepareth 2 loaves of egg salad sandwiches anytime the Women's Institute convener calls. Thank you all for coming today to celebrate the life of Ruth Algire. Many of you knew Mum personally for many years and have your own stories to tell, and I hope you'll share some of them with our family and with each other as the day goes on. But for the few among us who knew only the families, or for the grandchildren who knew, the great-grandchildren who knew Grandma but not about Grandma, there are a few remarks I'd like to make. Like most of us, she wore many hats in her lifetime. She was a daughter, a wife, a mother, a sister, an athlete, which was a surprise to some, a quilter, an artist, a grandmother, a homemaker, a seamstress, a gardener, a good cook. In my mind, the hat that defines her best was teacher. And this may seem odd since I was never in her class, but I was always her student. Mum was born in 1923, the 4th in a family that would become 6, the Kennedy six-pack, as they became known later. She was raised on a farm in Dunrobin, west of Ottawa, with cousins nearby for playmates. And as they grew, the importance of education was a constant theme, perhaps because her mother was also a teacher. Playing school was taken seriously in Granny Kennedy's kitchen. On one occasion, her father picked her and 2 of her cousins up in Ottawa after high school, and he was dismayed to find that while the cousins had stayed for extra Latin lessons, Ruth had stayed to practice the high jump. In 1942, after graduation from Ontario Teachers College, she began her teaching career in a 1-room school in Fitzroy Harbour. The following year, some friends that she had made at Teachers College from Williamsburg, and that would be Ruth Beckstead from Iroquois and Marion Laux, I think, convinced her that she should look further afield and enticed her to come to Williamsburg, and she was hired at what we can know as the Hess School on the 6th Concession, which is Saving Street now. In the fall of 1943, she attended a dance following the wedding of Walter and Jean Whittaker. I was talking to Doris earlier, and we're trying to get the dates on that, but it was sometime through that winter, and she met a young man serving with the RCAF, that would be Claire, and we all know how that turned out. In fact, one time Mum told me that she was happy to be in Williamsburg because the people laughed and had fun. Granted, living in Williamsburg in the post-Dr. Locke years must have seemed like high life compared to the rural crossroads of Dunrobin. In all, Mum taught for 33 years, 17 of them in a 1-room school. Our current generation should consider what was expected of the teacher in those days. There were 8 grades in 1 room, probably 20 to 25 students, with all levels of learning ability and behavioral issues. No teaching assistants, no snow days, no PD days. Not only would there have been 8 lesson plans to prepare daily, but the teacher was also the playground supervisor, and the lunchroom supervisor, and the school nurse, and the janitor to make sure that there was wood in the wood stove, probably to unplug the plumbing, whatever that amounted to in those days, and the administrator and the school secretary all rolled into one. In 1958, when she went to teach grade 7 in Morrisburg, she must have thought she hit the jackpot, with only 1 class, a staff room and other adults to talk to, and a modern school building. Many people are employed as teachers, but not all of them teach in every aspect of their lives. Mum taught Sunday school, explorers, 4-H clubs. She taught English lessons for the Dutch immigrants who settled in Williamsburg in the 1950s. Jim and I remember the Van Moorsels and the Byfeld family sitting around our table in the kitchen a couple evenings a week, studying and repeating vocabulary. That was ESL before ESL had been invented. Everything was a lesson to be planned, executed, and reviewed, and, if you knew my mother, in many cases not to be questioned. Those were the days of 5 R's: reading, writing, arithmetic, respect, and responsibility. Mum's other lifelong activity was the Women's Institute, an organization that began around 1900 and offered rural women an opportunity to learn and make contributions to their community, as well as to socialize, hence the aforementioned egg sandwiches. Each meeting began with a recitation of the Mary Stuart Collect, several copies of which are on the table out in the hall, and I printed them because they are a wonderful, compassionate way to live your life, and anyone who wishes to have a copy of that, it's a very generous expression of how people should live, I think. I encourage you to read it. It was through the Women's Institute that Mum became interested in 4-H work, and she was the leader of several clubs, actually starting back when she was only about 17 herself. She started leading clubs called the Club Girl Entertains and Dressing for Success, and I remember different times we had garden club going on. On the second Tuesday of the month, when she went, as our dad would say, to the institution, you could be sure she was prepared to shed some light on whatever topic was being presented or to present her own program on some cultural or educational project. She kept copious files on current events and on places to which she and Dad had traveled and could come up with a presentation to suit any bill. She had teacher written all over her. Part of her Women's Institute legacy is a collection of essays that she wrote over a period of years, most of them for competitions that the Women's Institute had challenged their members to. The topics are largely personal history, and there are copies on the table out here in the hall, and we'll take them over to the Macintosh Center later. They make wonderful reading of her early life, and her early life as a war wife, the ice storm of 1998, and so on. I think you'd enjoy reading them. Well, to me, she was a teacher. To her grandchildren, she was flannelette pajamas and apple pies. And to her great-grandchildren, she was a kind old lady. We'll each remember her in our own way. Mum and Dad had a good marriage lasting almost 65 years. They each brought a particular strength to the union. She was substance and he was salt. Substance holds things together, keeps the home fires burning, puts the dinner on the table, writes the letters, and carries out the duties and the details that make family and friendships hang together. Salt brings the fun, the flavor, and spontaneity. When Dad died in 2009, despite her efforts to remain independent, she missed and needed her salt, and after 2 years decided to move to assisted living in Brockville. It was not an easy move for her. She didn't know anyone in the residence and was unfamiliar with the street names and the store advertising that she saw in the newspaper, but she did her best to write a new chapter in her life. Again, approaching it in a very orderly, professional fashion. She made a few good friends, and especially a kind, fun-loving gentleman named Austin, and together they had a happy relationship for a couple of years. We called Austin her boy toy, because he was 6 months younger than she was, and he had a car and a driver's license. Several times a week, the two of them would escape from the residence and go out for a drive, usually stopping for ice cream somewhere. The staff at Bridalwood called them Bonnie and Clyde. After Austin died, almost exactly a year ago, it became increasingly difficult for Mum to engage with the community and the programs at the residence. Her world was shrinking, and she was happy to spend her days in her room looking at her photo albums, of which we counted over 100, and rereading cards and letters. My sister-in-law Jane wrote letters faithfully almost every week, and Mum carried those, as well as postcards from Alberta and pictures of a granddaughter in Germany, who she never got to meet. She carried them around in her purse and would show them to people who would take time to look at them. She did enjoy going out to church, and after the service, Bob and I would usually take her out for lunch. We were able to do that right up until the week before she died, actually. At this point, I would also like to acknowledge with gratitude and appreciation Bob and Jane, who spent 50 years, almost 50 years, sharing our mother and treating her with kindness and compassion. I also want to recognize some cousins who visited regularly and helped cover the bases when Jim and I needed some reinforcements. That would be Sharon, and Alan, Ed and Joanne, and Brian and Helen. Thank you very much. Getting old isn't easy. They say it ain't for sissies. Sometimes it's said that growing old beats the alternative, but we know that's not always the case. Growing old with poor health is not what any of us wants, and Mum had made a care directive that made her wishes clear. Given our druthers, I think we would all say that we would like to be considered a productive member of society, to love and be loved by family and community, to contribute charitably, to to be remembered fondly, and when the time comes, to depart this world with simplicity and dignity. And this she did. I'm going to borrow a theme from a poem called Gone From My Sight by Henry Van Dyke. In it, he refers to standing on the seashore, watching as a ship sails in the morning breeze and starts for the ocean. She's an object of beauty, and we watch until at last she fades on the horizon, and somebody by my side says, she is gone. While in a parallel universe on an opposite shore, as the speck of a sail appears and begins to grow larger, the shout goes up, here she comes. What took her so long?